Hi, this is Jeremiah Jeff Love with the Capitalism show. And with me is Brian Brilka, my friend and mentor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Love. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. And today we're going to talk about what radical capitalism might mean. I mean, it's kind of a conundrum to say radical capitalism when capitalism itself has just gone awry. What do you think about it? Can we define this beast?
Well, let's break it up. We got two words, radical and capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
What is capitalism? What is capital? Capital based on the concept of resources, capital based on the concept of manpower, concepts of inherent versus perceived value. All these are important concepts which we probably want to dissect a little bit.
Yeah.
What is the concept of value? And how does it connect to the concept of capital?
Well, of course, in our country and around the world, capitalism has taken over with its concept that capital is far more valuable than any human being might be. Of course, the juxtaposition of labor versus capital is well known in the world since Marx. And although Marxism had some good analysis of capitalism, it didn't really have a solution, in my opinion. To take over the world with dictators doesn't work, as we know. State capitalism, as practiced by the Russians and now the Chinese, probably isn't going to work either for the Chinese any more than it did for the Russians. Of course, their problem was they didn't go through capitalism on their way to socialism, which is what Marx recommended. They just went right to socialism and with a violent revolution. And as we know, millions of people were killed in that. So capitalism is the value of the dollar more than the value of the hour of work, is my opinion. That's how it works right now. I think radical capitalism is turning that upside down so that the people not for profit is really the way to go. I think that we need to convert our capitalism into a humanistic, socially responsible kind of capitalism, and that's what I call radical. Radical being the very basic principle upon which anything is founded. So we're not just superficially fixing little things that happen, but actually changing the way capitalism works. I don't think capitalism is bad per se. I think the way it's been practiced is awful.
And who shall define this responsibility? Who shall be, the keeper of the flame? Is it something that's done by a single individual, by a small group of individuals, by some knowledgeable body of people? Is it something that's held in trust for the society as a whole? It certainly isn't held in trust that way now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I think it's going to need the cooperation of a whole bunch of people, and we have a whole bunch of people out there in the form of Occupy folks. There's the biggest movement in the United States right now. They're gathering political power as we speak because their just numbers are huge. And they have the power to arrive, and they have the volition to protest in the streets if necessary, to gather around a certain bank as a symbol for what's wrong with this country. But they're going to be spokesmen. I feel like I might be one of them, you are one, and we're trying to articulate this kind of massive change that's coming over the country as a result of the failed economy. And as, again, not that I'm a communist, but going back to Marx, he pointed out that nothing's going to change until the circumstances are right. And the circumstances are right. We have millions of people who have lost their homes, who cannot feed themselves, who are now homeless. The economy's in shambles because of a few rich people being way more greedy than they deserve to be. And we need to stop that. We need to value human beings more than we do profit.
So these mysterious, overly accommodated individuals, do these people have names, or are they just amorphous characters somewhere out there in the ecosphere, in the economic world that do these things and continue to do these things and continue to get away with what they do? Or can they be brought to task?
Well, I just saw a program the other night asking that question. Why hasn't anybody been thrown in jail for the fall of the economy, not just the United States, but the whole world economy, because of a greedy bunch of people who run banks? I don't have any names to put out there, but they're certainly human beings that run the banks that make these decisions. And it's like a crowd swarming around dollars, and a bunch of bees buzzing around the dollars, because these people have huge needs in terms of money. I saw a sign the other day at the Move to Amend meeting in Courthouse Square that kind of, it was actually a song they were singing, and they said, "The poor have too much money and the rich need more." I mean, come on. These people are not going to give up their wealth without a fight or something happening that will provide them with the incentive to change their ways. And who they are, you know, the head of banks, the heads who make these decisions that affect
Large corporations.
Large corporations. And I think the change is coming down. For example, the new B Corporation that came to California in the not too distant past.
Thank you, Jared Huffman.
Thank you, Jared Huffman, and many others. There's like, I'm not sure now, maybe 7 to 10 states that have that kind of corporate structure available to people. In California, Patagonia was the first B Corporation. That these folks were already on the right track in terms of their sense of whether people are worth money.
This is a voluntary business structure, not something that's mandated by current corporate law, correct?
That's correct, and maybe we need to change that. Maybe all corporations need to become B-type corporations, or at least follow those rules where the bottom line is not the end all of what they do.
Is there some kind of a reward structure for a company choosing at its inception to become a B corporation or a more conventional type of corporation?
The reward is that you feel good about what you're doing. If you're a human being with some kind of conscience, you'd rather be a B corporation than a normal corporation, even though you may make less money per year than the normal corporation would. The structure doesn't define exactly how much money goes to charity, or how much money gets to benefit the workers, or how much money goes to the community. But as a B corporation, you're obligated to serve your community, produce products that are useful in the world and don't create a tremendous amount of waste, and do it in a sustainable way so that your employees enjoy their work. They have the benefits they need to succeed and feel like they're well taken care of by their job. And the community around the corporation's plants and sites is being served in one way or another, not only providing jobs, but also helping with infrastructure, perhaps, which all corporations need to function, helping with the local health providers and so on, whatever their charitable institutions are that they choose to help in the community, to do it to a greater degree. Right now, it's just a way of gaining goodwill from so they can advertise that they support this, that, and the other, and everybody loves the this, that, and the other, but the corporation itself is still acting like a hog.
Well, as this is there's an excellent book speaking to this topic called Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yes.
I invite everyone to check that out. It's quite astounding.
I'll bet, yeah. I'll bet it's got the whole thing in there. So in my opinion, it's going to be a mass movement, and it is gathering steam as we speak. I think that if you look around and read the literature coming from the left especially, you're going to see all kinds of alternatives. Ultimately, the government has got to take power away from the corporations. Right now, the corporations, the government might as well be a wholly owned subsidiary of the major corporations, because they're the ones who buy the seats for the senators and congressmen on the whole. Mm-hmm. They're the people that are putting up the huge amounts of money it takes to get elected nowadays, and that's got to stop.
There is a school of thought which holds that the U.S. government is, in fact, a corporation. Mm. and is run as such. This is a unique interpretation of law, and ties in with a lot of other concepts relating to personal sovereignty. I invite people to examine online or in your local communities any reference to sovereign law, and I believe you'll find more and more groups like this springing up and discussing the concept of sovereignty as an individual within the society. Sovereign law, check it out.
Okay, sounds like a good idea to me. So ultimately what we're talking about is giving democracy back to the Senate and the Congress. I mean, we have a non-functional Senate that basically can't pass a bill. We have a Congress that's full of new congressmen only because they gerrymandered in 4 states. I mean, when you look at the political process as we know it right now, it just seems to be that it should be against the law for anybody to take away the vote from another citizen as a group or as an individual. And the Republicans have done that over and over again. There's not just the Republicans probably, but in the most egregious non-democratic actions like gerrymandering a district so that the population is set aside, the majority is set aside from the vote, so that some of these ideological idiots get elected into Congress, and all they do is say no to everything that needs to be done. So we have a crippled Congress because of the corporations that support these folks, and because there's no law against it. But I'd love to be able to capture, get one of these people who actually engineers this gerrymandering. I don't know who it is, but I'm sure there's a person behind it in every case. And they need to be thrown in fucking jail. Excuse me. Oh, I said a bad word.
Now, this conversation is ranging afield from the concept of capitalism. Tie us back together with that concept of capitalism. Where does this whole government, functional or non-functional or dysfunctional, tie back into the capital concept? Where's the connect here, or the disconnect?
Well, the disconnect is that right now capitalism has the upper hand on democracy, even though they're not the same thing. Of course, capitalism is a commercial method of doing business, really. But what we don't have is any kind of democratic institutions within capitalism. And what we need is a strong government. Of course, the conservatives, the Republicans, of course, don't want government at all. To them, it's interfering with their capitalist aims. And capitalist, again, meaning that the dollar is more valued than the person. They don't care about democracy. And that's the part that really bugs me, is that they can get away with destroying democracy at every turn in order to get elected, in order to make their profits, without regard to the conditions that they create for average human beings. It's got to change, and it's got to change pretty rapidly. It's not just the United States. I mean, capitalism is really messing the planet up by its very nature. It does not care about the environment. It does not care about anything but the bottom line. And so the B Corporation is like a little glimmer of hope, and I don't know whether enough corporations will turn to that model in time in order to stop the destruction that corporations are wreaking currently on the earth.
Dr. Love, I've dabbled in foreign exchange, currency trading, and also in options, and have discovered that there is a major disconnect between, between the concepts of intrinsic and perceived value. As an arena in which people play and make money off of other money, and make money off of future perceived value. These are arenas where the vast sums of money change hands. Unfortunately, not much ever came to me. but in all of these processes, there is no work being performed that actually creates intrinsic value. Mm-hmm. It's a simple maneuvering of numbers and betting on outcomes. It's that whole concept of playing the market. Mm-hmm. And I believe that this may be one chink in the armor that could be looked at. One way to potentially redirect the energy that we spend as individuals and as a society, shuffling stuff around, moving things from bank account to bank account, without ever actually creating anything of value. I believe that there should be a direct coupling of effort to result. Mm-hmm. If you are going to exert yourself in a capital generating fashion, it wants to have an intrinsic result as a product, as a result of that work. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what's the point? Mm-hmm. And this is a kind of a nebulous one to understand, because the perceived value is mostly about the way we look at our world right now. We look at the world in terms of our perception of it. Mm. I'm fond of that Latin phrase, esse est percipi. Being is perception. Mm. And what you believe to be of value suddenly takes on that value as if it really has that value. Mm. That potted plastic palm behind you in the corner has no intrinsic value. It has an aesthetic value. It has a perceived value. I can't eat it. And so what is the value of that particular object in my world? Mm-hmm. We can go with this in any number of different directions and say that if I'm going to exert myself to create something, anything, mm-hmm. it wants to have a utility beyond its completion, such that I or somebody else can take it and do something of value with it, and thereby create more value. Mm-hmm. For example, if you design, I don't know, how about planter boxes, and you create this object into which you can put dirt, that device then has a utility beyond its original conception and creation. It now can go ahead and produce food. So mm-hmm. these are very basic concepts, which I think mm-hmm. we've gotten far away from in our understanding of the concept of capital, to mm-hmm. the point where capital has taken on an intrinsic value of its own. It's almost as if money is actually this object that's got an intrinsic value. It has no intrinsic value. It is only by perception that the concept of capital has value. Mm-hmm. If you and I agree that dollar bill sitting on the table is worth something, you and I will do business. But that dollar bill represents a value mm-hmm. of something else that we're talking about. Whether it's your suspenders or the plastic palm or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. The minute that agreement breaks down, where you or I say, yeah, you know what, that's just a piece of paper. I don't want that unit of exchange to represent the transaction that we're about to go into. Mm. So here's a second chink in the armor. Mm. What if capital has to have some kind of intrinsically valued resource or a service associated with it in order for it to be of value itself? Mm. If you're just using it to gamble, rolling the bones on what corn is going to be worth next week, no, there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there that way. There's no intrinsic value in that concept. Yeah. And therefore that type of transaction will not take place. Mm. That's a great concept. By the way, you can't have my suspenders. Oh, come on, dude. My pants will fall down. I'll trade you for my stainless steel screw. Sorry, folks. Okay, people do like to gamble. My sense is, though, that all the speculation with money and products in the future has to do with the fact that people just don't want to work. There are people who do not want to actually use their physical labor in the world. They would much rather play with money
because they can sit in their office and do all kinds of things and make lots of money simply by buying and selling things over the internet, for example. And what an easy life for them. You know, they're making lots of money, they have no problems. Not all of them, of course, but you're right. But what can you do? Can you make a law that says that if we're not talking commodities in a very basic trade for money for a product, if we're not talking producing something of useful value in a manufacturing plant, how can you skim off that which in fact I heard the other day that Iceland had done something like that.
Have they?
Now I can't give you the details, but I understand after their crash, they took all those guys who were speculating with money and market bonds and stocks and all that, and just put them in jail.
Really?
Or kicked them out of the country.
Very interesting.
And
That's pretty radical.
That's pretty radical, and that's what I think may have to happen. We've got to get rid of these people who are sucking on the lifeblood of the country. That when you do something, you produce something. You use your labor for good use. And nobody should have the power to take stock in your company and speculate it to the point where your company might be doing well and making a good product. But because of the speculation in the stock market, all of a sudden the company goes dead because it can't raise any money anymore.
Or gets bought up and split
or gets bought up and spit out
and split into pieces and sold off.
Yeah, without any concern for the workers or the people in the community.
Gordon Gekko.
Gordon Gekko, there's a name.
Greed is good.
We should throw that guy in jail.
Well, I think they did in the movie, but he got out, and he's back.
He bought his way out.
Yes. Well, yeah. In a way, that's probably kind of the way this works.
Mm-hmm.
Capital aggregates. Mm-hmm. It seems to be just the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. As it starts to collect, then suddenly more starts to collect, and more and more and more, and pretty soon you've got this massive pile of capital, which has this. It doesn't seem like it can do anything else but collect more of itself unto itself. Mm. There may want to be some kind of a procedure or process in place that prevents that from happening, or that slows that process down, or that requires that above a certain threshold that amount of capital will be managed by a trust that is in keeping with the best interests of the society rather than the best interests of just the corporation or the individual who holds that.
Right on.
It's almost like a vaccine for your microbe.
Yeah.
You need a vaccine that doesn't allow too much capital to collect in one place.
That sounds like we need to take back Wall Street in some way, and I'm not sure how to do that.
I'm fond of the idea of capital as using the analogy of the hydroelectric plant. The water sits behind the dam. There's this incredible, potential energy waiting there to be utilized, but it can't do any work or produce anything of value, i.e. electricity, unless it's flowing. It has to move through the turbines in order to generate the electricity. So the concept of capital as this huge body of water sitting behind the dam, and its movement through the society, i.e. the turbine, in order to create the value which the society can then use to create more value. So perhaps one of the notions of this vaccine that we're talking about is to have money be fluid. It has to stay in motion in order for it to have value. The minute it's sitting in your bank account, in your bank, not doing anything, it becomes valueless. And I think that this concept is already realized by the lending institutions. They take your money and they invest it. You go down to your local bank and you put $20,000 in your bank account. You think there's $20,000 sitting in your bank account? 20,000 pieces of paper, in a metal box? No. That money is out there circulating around in the world somewhere. It's gotten put into a mutual fund here. It's gotten put into, Krugerrands in South Africa. It's got put into whatever their financial planners deem are the best returns on the investment for that day, that week, that month, whatever. In the banking industry, there's this concept of float, and it's, it becomes less and less I'll say it this way. In the old days, float was a very important ingredient in how a bank took and used your money. You would have a 3-day turnaround time if you wanted to put a check into your bank account. And that 3 days was critical, because with thousands and thousands of people doing that very thing, that bank is sitting on 3 days worth of capital that it can put anywhere it wants to. And what can you do with, millions of dollars in 3 days out there in the speculative markets? A lot. So while you're sitting there waiting for your check to clear, they're playing with your money and making money off of your money. So they understand that concept, how the money has to keep moving in order for it to have utility. Now, if that becomes true for all capital, then suddenly maybe we got something to play with. It becomes valueless the minute you sit on it. I don't know.
Well, it's a good idea. I think we're coming to the end of our time now, but that question of what to do about speculation and the money being invested in elections affecting downgrading democracy to the point where the government, again, is a wholly owned subsidiary of some major corporations and major banks. And the banks using their money to create chaos overseas so they can support their local corporation in taking the resources of a country and leaving the people in that country to starve. There's got to be a solution to that problem. And I'm going to close the show leaving that question on the air, unless you want to just
I
take
think it's
a
a
moment.
good way to leave.
Yeah.
It's a good way to go out here.
So I thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. We're
you.
going to continue it as usual every week. And there we are. Thank you very much, folks.
See you next week.
See you next week.